Any objection? There being none, consideration of the aforementioned bill is now in order.
Mr. President, I move to recognize the sponsor, Senator Cayetano, for the individual amendments.
While we are awaiting Senator Gatchalian, may I in the meantime recognize Senator
Risa
Hontiveros for her individual amendments. And Senator Win, upon its arrival, can introduce anterior amendments rather, if any there be. The lady is recognized and may proceed.
Salamat Abi, Mr. President, and good evening once again to the good sponsor. My amendments were 11 yesterday. They became 3 as of today. But as of tonight, with thanks to the good sponsor for accepting 2 out of those 3, they are now reduced to only 1 proposed amendment. So if I may proceed, Mr. President, good sponsor, on page 21, line 12, under section 28,
Page 21.
after the words anti-competitive acts, I propose to add the phrase, comma, and subject to cross-ownership limits to be determined by the ERC. I so move, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
What does the sponsor say?
Well, I will explain sana before I give my answer, but because the Senate President is asking, I will have to reject this because it is very similar to the amendment made by our colleague from Valenzuela, Senator Gatchalian. We rejected it with this explanation. The natural gas industry is in its infancy stage. So when you think of storage and transportation, it's very difficult if we will prevent the owners of the storage from also owning the transportation, because normally the storage necessarily needs the transport, the pipelines, to be able to deliver it. So if we prohibit common owners, then the investors for the storage will still have to find somebody else, convince somebody else to invest in this. So we humbly believe that in its infancy stage, we should not be prohibiting investors from owning both a storage facility and a transportation facility. Perhaps down the road, when this is a robust, thriving, vibrant industry, that can always be considered. Anyway, nothing prevents us from amending this at a later time. But for now, we believe that the clear message we should send investors is that if they choose to invest in natural gas, whether it's indigenous or imported for that matter, they don't have to worry about another investor or wait for another investor to come in to handle a very much integrated business unit. And again, the example I gave was storage and transportation. So for that reason, we respectfully cannot accept the amendment of Her Honor.
Thank you, good sponsor, Mr. President. I'd just like to pursue this a little more, if it would be possible. Ang dahilan po, Mr. President, kung bakit binanggit ko dito sa proposed amendment, yung cross-ownership limits, ay dahil we can learn lessons, 2 decades worth of lessons, mula halimbawa sa EPIRA, which though it governs what is right now still a separate industry from ditong sa natural gas na sinusubukan natin through this bill i-regulate, is in some ways parallel. And if we recall in that law governing that industry, the cross-ownership limits are set at 25%. Kaya ko rin po sinabi dito sa proposed amendment na to be determined by the ERC ay dahil pwede pong i-consider yung ganyang katulad na limit, 25%. Pwede din nilang itaas or for all we know, pwede nilang ibaba. And also something, Mr. President, na binanggit ng good sponsor, yung punto na maybe later on. So yung yung limits na pinopropose ko na ide-determine ng ERC sa aking proposed amendment ay pwedeng mag-set din po ng time, ng timetable. It could be similar, maaring mayroong sunset clause or maaring may stages in which certain limits will come into play. So kumbaga, hindi siya set in stone kaagad, parehong 25% sa EPIRA. I-determine po, both in terms of possible percentages and limits in terms of kailan mag-kick in ang certain limits over time as determined by the ERC. At least, ayon Mr. President, sa aking proposed amendment. There was another point, Mr. President, but I'm forgetting it right now, Mr. President. Good sponsor.
I can respond, Your Honor, and
Thank
then
you,
if
Mr.
you remember, feel free to
Yes.
cut me off anytime, no? I appreciate her honor's explanation, the analogy. However, I need to point out that under our existing energy setup, yung NGCP, yung transmission lines na ito, exclusive grant yon. So wala talagang makapasok na iba. Wala ho tayong ganon. Anyone is welcome. There is no prohibition to have 2 or 3 transportation systems in place. None at all, Mr. President. So when we have the explorations or the importations that would require the storage, anyone can bid or can put up on their own and just say, I'm going to put up a transportation system. That is all well and good. Now, what we don't want to happen is that the importer who will need that storage facility or the investor in the exploration cannot transport its gas because pinagbawalan natin dahil wala pang ibang may gustong mag-invest in transportation. So we are not prepared, Mr. President, for that scenario, and therefore we cannot accept. And again, in due time, we are very happy to reconsider this, but I don't think it's something that is, I don't think it is, what is the word I'm looking for? I don't think it is prudent at this time to put those limitations because we will prevent investments, Mr. President. Kung ako yung investor or kung ako yung proponent and then naghahanap ako ng investors and then I will tell them, okay na, we have a consortium. Remember, these consortiums require many, many investors. Very few entities can do it on their own. Even these multi-billion energy companies have partners. And then we'll have to tell them, wait, you cannot proceed. Or they will have to tell us, we're not going to proceed because we have the funding, but we cannot put up the transportation. So, unfortunately, I cannot accept this right now, Mr. President.
If I may further, Mr. President, good sponsor is right that unlike with the NGCP, hindi po ito magiging exclusive grant. Pero dun pa lang sa botong kinuha natin kanina, dun sa earlier proposed amendment ng good gentleman mula sa Valenzuela, we did affirm that in the bill, prioritized or privileged yung indigenous natural gas. And with the way the bill is shaping up, I think we are shaping a very encouraging bill, a very friendly bill to indeed possibly a big group of companies and consortia. I don't share the worry of the good sponsor. I think she's being modest about the bill. I think the bill will invite a good number of potential stakeholders, even in those separate but parallel economic activities, to use the good sponsors example of storage and transportation, etc. That's why nung ipinanukala ko kanina, Mr. President, itong proposed amendment ko tungkol sa cross-ownership limits to be determined by the ERC, hindi po ako nangamba na maging disincentive ito. In fact, it might be an incentive para mas maraming stakeholders ang pumasok. At wala namang magpipigil na they may have corporate ties with each other. No? But at least with the cross-ownership limits to be determined by the ERC, sana as I mentioned earlier to the good sponsor, ma-incorporate sana yung mga leksyon na natutunan natin sa nakaraang 2 dekada ng pagpapatupad ng EPIRA dun sa isang industriyang iyon, and which in fairness, Mr. President, has been honored more in the breach. Kasi katakot-takot na cross-ownership actually sa current energy sector natin, which has, I think, been part of many of our problems dun sa industriyang iyon, at kaya nga po gusto nating amyendahan yung EPIRA. So I was just hoping na pakinabangan natin yung mga leksyong iyon dito pa lang sa pagbubuo natin ng bagong batas na ito.
We note Her Honor's opinion on this matter, but we have already made our response clear. This will not be accepted at this time, Mr. President.
Thank you, good sponsor, Mr. President. Mr. Good Sponsor, I was tempted to appeal this also, but if I'm going to base it on the outcome of a previous appeal on a previously rejected proposed amendment, I will content myself tonight with saying that I would have wanted to appeal this and subject it to a vote. Before I conclude my proposed amendments, Mr. President, good sponsor, just for the record, I thought that, and may I just ask for confirmation from the good sponsor kung tama yung understanding ko, natanggap na nga po ba yung proposed amendments 1 and 3 ko, which I submitted to the good sponsor's office in writing? Because if I was mistaken in my understanding, ipopropose ko ngayon for the record para matanggap din kung sakali ng good sponsor formally,
Yeah.
Mr. President.
So I understand that Her Honor submitted written amendments today, and the only one that we are not able to accept is the one that Her Honor explained just now. The others will be accepted if Her Honor wants to be the one to read them, we can listen, or this representation can read them, but they are accepted.
Thank you very much, good sponsor. So, babaybayan natin yon when we go page by page on the
Yes,
amendments.
yes. I can
All
take
right.
the lead, or Her Honor can stand up if she wants.
Maraming salamat, good
Okay.
sponsor, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Risa.